So Anthony Edwards is a modern superstar player, and if you're familiar with this guy, you know that he's one to speak his mind. He usually doesn't beat around the bush and just says what he feels. That's commendable, but every once in a while, you could say something pretty ridiculous with that mindset. People who are watching this video and who are familiar with the situation are probably going to be thinking that I'm going to be pretty mad about this one. The truth is, I'm not. I just think his comment was extremely ignorant, and it seems rather obvious to 90% of basketball fans. But before I go on with my thoughts, let me first explain the situation and what he said. So essentially, he was interviewed by the Wall Street Journal, and this was his quote about old school basketball. "I didn't watch it back in the day, so I can't speak on it." Let me interrupt for a second, but he should have stopped right there. And unfortunately, he continues to speak on it, regardless of the fact that he said he couldn't speak on it. They say it was tougher back then than it is now, but I don't think anybody had skill back then. Michael Jordan was the only one who really had skill. You know what I mean? So that's why when they saw Kobe, they were like, oh my god. But now, everybody has skill. So right off the bat, Ant looks like a casual, and is regurgitating a lot of narratives that you see on basketball Twitter. Now before I get into the meat and potatoes of his actual comment, let me first point out that I think this was a terrible PR move. Anthony Edwards doesn't just have a lot of young NBA fans, but he's kind of been the recent poster child for a lot of old school fans as well. For one, he famously made the comments that he believes guys shouldn't be load managing, and that whenever he's capable to go out there and play, he's going to go out there and play. Immediately, that won points with old school basketball fans. Then he's a guy who speaks his mind, he plays through injuries, he does a lot of trash talking, and he has a really old school mindset. He has a swagger and energy, and even mannerisms that seem similar to a young Michael Jordan. Some MJ fans will get really upset by those comments, because yes, I acknowledge he isn't nearly on the level of a young Michael Jordan. But with that being said, there are still some similarities with their personalities and with their character. Because of this, I've witnessed on my own basketball channel how he's been embraced by old school basketball fans. And now, he's basically spitting in the face of those old school fans. If Edwards is going to be saying that Michael Jordan was the only skilled player back in the day, think about the guys that MJ was competing against. Apparently, Magic Johnson wasn't skilled. Apparently, Larry Bird wasn't skilled. Or how about Hakeem Olajuwon, one of the most fluid, artistic big men that the game of basketball has ever seen. Then you get into the latter half of MJ's career. His career did overlap with guys like Allen Iverson, Kobe Bryant, and Tracy McGrady. Anthony Edwards is literally saying that those guys don't have skill. Like, what are we doing here? Some people are going to say that you should always take the opinion of the basketball player over the YouTuber or the analyst or the guy who's never played professionally. But when this is the opinion, seriously? So then people in my comment section are going to start asking, if his comments are so ridiculous, then why do you even bother acknowledging them? And my answer to that is, well, because history is important, and people buy into propaganda when it's left unchecked. 20 years ago, people generally weren't making the plumber's argument in basketball discourse, but now it's one of the most common talking points in the community. This is what happens when a narrative gains momentum, and people who know the truth are not calling it out. Young people are susceptible and impressionable, especially when a narrative is being preached by someone that they consider as a hero. Overall, I still really like Anthony Edwards as a basketball player, but man, these are some comments that are going to really alienate a large demographic of basketball fans. And if we're being completely honest, it's just simply not true. Like, not even close. It would be one thing if he said this modern era is more skilled than past eras. I could see that argument, and most basketball fans might even agree. But that's not what he said. He said no one other than MJ was skilled. Even MJ himself has admitted that his skills and game did not originate with his own imagination. He pulled much of that from David Thompson, who was the guy who introduced him into the Hall of Fame. Listen, I realize at this point I'm going up against millions and millions of people that have now have this narratives and these thought process permeating their basketball discourse. but I'm just tired of it, man. I get to a certain extent that young basketball fans are saying this because a lot of old heads have been taking a dump on current NBA players. So I get that. But whatever happened to just appreciating greatness? What happened to being grateful to the guys who came before you? And being grateful for the guys who carried the torch after you? In a way, sustaining your legacy by keeping the game relevant. Both the old school basketball players and the new basketball players need to have a healthy appreciation of one another, and the same can be said for basketball fans. From that perspective, this whole situation is just really frustrating, because what's happening as a result is we're having less genuine basketball conversations. I appreciate any basketball channel, any basketball analyst, or any basketball fan that can try to remove some of those biases and just have genuine, authentic, analytical basketball conversations. But now you got guys saying things like, well, I didn't watch, but I know the quality was bad because reasons. That makes no sense whatsoever. These narratives and these talking points have really been inspiring me lately, and I really just want to start comparing eras, not to prove which one's better, but really to make the point that the gap in athleticism and skill is not really as big as a lot of people think. It's one thing to say that players weren't that athletic or weren't that skilled in the 1990s. But then I'd ask Anthony Edwards, could you even name 30 players from the 1990s? And honestly, I think he'd probably struggle to do it. Of course, as the years go on, the talent pool is going to seem less and less as younger fans become more unfamiliar with players from generations past. Let me give you an example. Think of a guy like Derrick Jones Jr. He can jump through the roof, and he's one of the most athletic players that I've ever seen. But 30 years from now, no one will be talking about this guy. He doesn't have hardware, he doesn't have impressive stats, he doesn't have records, he was never a superstar. He's just not going to be remembered. It might sound harsh, but that's the reality of basketball fandom. Sure, you might remember him when you're 60 years old, but then you're going to watch basketball discourse being controlled by a bunch of people in their teens, in their 20s, and in their 30s. And they'll have no idea who that guy is, therefore they'll act like he never existed, and they'll start taking a crap on your era. Ultimately, this is just a little bit of a rant on my part. Again, I'm not really upset about what Edwards said, because I think 90% of basketball fans in general are going to realize that he's being a little bit dramatic. A lot of young fans think that players weren't that skilled back in the day, but to say that Jordan was the only skilled player is pretty ridiculous. Still, regardless, there is a lack of appreciation, respect, and knowledge for past basketball eras. And a lot of the time, some of those guys bring it upon themselves by constantly dumping on the talent of today's modern players. As much as I love him, take a guy like Shaq as an example. So what do you guys think? Is there any truth to Anthony Edwards' comment? I look forward to hearing your thoughts in the comment section below. Thanks for watching as always. Make sure to like and subscribe for more basketball content, and I'll see you guys in the next video.